Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Criterion Learning Series on performance management overview. So today we're going to be talking about the performance reviews area of the system and everything that goes into the various aspects of performance within system here. So let me go ahead and switch over to my browser. So you should be able to see this here in a moment. As I'm switching here, just a reminder, we do have a Q&A and a chat. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to use those to ask those questions or make comments on here. But you should be able to see my browser now showing self-service. So as you can see, we're going to talk about performance management overview. So a lot of these things actually you're able to do right here within the system here in self-service, things like doing a performance review or approving a performance review or looking at previous reviews and things like that. So we'll come back to that because I want to show you where that stuff is configured. Then you'll be able to see it here in self-service. So I'm going to hop over to the settings because that's where we obviously would set things up. So here you can see the settings here, and we have a whole section for performance right here. It says performance reviews, and you can see these right here. Now, there are some things that are in the code tables. So I will talk about that as well. In fact, I'm going to open that in another tab just so I can jump over there very quickly to go back over there if I need to. And here you'll see the things. I'm going to just go down the list, not exactly in order here because I'm going to skip rating periods that go to templates and then periods. So let's talk about first company goals. So company goals go into performance review templates. And so there might be a goal for a group of employees, everybody who's going to be doing that particular review template you're using, whatever it is. You may have a goal for everybody. So you'll see a thing here, number of sales meeting expectations, company grew since last review period, whatever it might be. You could come up with a goal. It doesn't need to be called, for the entire company because a review might just be for a department or a certain job or something like that, but it'd be everybody who's doing that particular review. So very simple to set these up. You'll see a name and a description. It does need to be active for it to be used. So you'll want to make sure that's checked off there, but you can see these here just like that. Now, if you have had some previously, you may want to, check this right here to see which ones are inactive, and you can always make them active by toggling these here. So if it's inactive, I can make it active again or go in there and check the box. So very simple with the company goals there. Like I said, you may have this for everybody in the company, but it's more specifically for whatever review template you're setting up, you're going to have that. All right, next are your rating scales. The scales are used for both goals and competencies. So you may have more than one scale set up. In fact, you can see here, I've got 3 different ones. And of course, you could have as many as you need in the system here. So I'll click into one so you'll kind of see what this is like. You could call it whatever you like. The limit would be however many steps you might have that are not 0. All right, so 0 doesn't count as one of the steps. Only because when you do a 0 rating, you might want to say that it is not considered part of the total calculation. Perhaps it's something where they're not applicable for whatever reason. Maybe the person wasn't around long enough for it to apply to them, or maybe it's just not part of their job. So it might be not applicable, in which case you may want to not include that in your calculation for your overall score. All right, when you're setting these up, of course, you put in the scale, whatever it is, you see here 1 through 5. So the number, the name of it, and then if you would like a description, you can do that. So if you wanted to put in a lengthy description for what does not meet expectations, you could put that in there. The person who's performing the review or looking at the review after the fact is going to be able to click on a little icon to be able to see these longer descriptions if you have them in there. All right, and like I mentioned, you may have as many in here as you would like. So here's another example of these. All right, and then here's a 4th one. Our 3rd one is 1 to 4. This one doesn't have a 0 score, so they have to select one of these. All right, so once you've set up your scale or scales, now you're ready to set up your competencies. All right, so here are your competencies. Now, this is where you do need to set up a code table first, and that is the competency group. So you'll see here, if I click into one of these, in fact, let me click into one where I've got a description. When I click into them, you'll see that the group is a required field. So you'll want to make sure you actually have that set up first. You have to set it up before you can come into here to the competencies. And that's going to be done over here in your code tables. So as a reminder, system configuration code tables. It's a user code table, and it is called review competencies. All right, so you could set these up here. You'll see as an example, code description. All right, so super easy there to set those up. And of course, you could just have one, or you might have multiple, depending on whatever you're doing with your performance review, you might have multiple groups out here. Once you have those configured, then you can add these, because as you can see, the group is required there. There's the name, the scale that this is going to be using, and then the description of this particular name. Now, you don't need to have a score here. Perhaps you want something on the review that is simply where people put in notes. You wouldn't have a score on there. They would not be able to select a score, wouldn't be included in the overall score, but they might want to put in some notes about whatever it is that you're going to be commenting on the performance review. All right, and here you can see as many as you would like to add in here. So just show you some other examples here. This one's got a nice long description. Sometimes we see customers who want to put in links to something. Maybe you've got something in your handbook or a website or something like that. And you want to link to that. You could put that web address in here. So just copy and paste it from the address bar down into here, and then it would be clickable when somebody opens up the description on here. Right. We don't have any type of spell checking built in, but I do have Grammarly installed, which is something that you might want to install. I'm not endorsing or anything like that, but if you do need some type of spell checker, you'd want to use something like that, or you could copy and paste, let's say, out of Word or some other word processor like that. So you'll see here, I could fix that. Again, I'm not endorsing Grammarly, but that's just what I use. That's why it was highlighted. That's not part of our system. That's the browser plugin I have. All right. Once you've set up your first three things, the company goals, rating scales, and review competencies, now you're ready to configure a review template. All right, and I have a bunch of different templates out here. And again, just like with the other things, you can have as many of these as you need. So if you needed to have one literally for every single employee, and so you had 300 different performance reviews, you could do that. We don't limit these in any way. We don't charge extra if you go over a certain number or anything like that. So if you want to set up any number of them, you could do that. Let's go ahead and just click on one, just so you can kind of see how this works here. So the first thing is the name of the template. You'll probably want to make it descriptive, especially if you have more than one, so you know which one is which. Maybe you put in the job title in there or the department or something. But I would recommend making the name descriptive so that you don't just call it like performance review and have 6 of them called performance review and not have any idea what's what. But you could call it whatever you like there. Same thing with the description. The description is not a required field. As you can see, it doesn't have the red star. So if you would like to put the description in there, you can. Otherwise, you could just leave that blank. All right, and then the review scale, what this is used for is when we calculate the overall score for the review, with the competencies and goals and so forth, it's going to come up with some number, right? So let's say it's 80%. It's going to compare that score to the review scale here, and whichever one is the closest one. So in this situation, I got 1 through 4. So 0, 25, 25, 50, 75, and 100%. It's going to go ahead and select that. So if I got an 80, it would choose the scale at 75 because that's the closest right there. And it would, whatever the description is for that, it would say that I got that. So back to the scale, 1 to 4, it would do fully achieved as an example. All right, so that's what that is used for in your review scale. I guess I selected a different one. Here we go. I'll use this one. All right, so that's what that's for right there. You'll see it as a required field. All right, we'll talk about over here, active. So a template does need to be active to be used. So you'll want to make sure that it's active if you're ready to use that. Recruiting template, what this is for is this review template would not be used for performance reviews, but would be used during the application process. When you're interviewing, you may want to have your interviewers have a performance review style for the people that they're interviewing. So you might have various questions you want that person to ask, and then they give an overall score for the candidate, et cetera. So that would be what a recruiting template is for. If you're going to use this for the employees and not the applicants, you don't want to check that off. Otherwise, it won't be available for that. All right, allow manual competency rating and allow manual goal rating. What that would allow you to do is you could actually put in your own score in there instead of using the drop-down menus. All right, we'll go down here and we'll see the balancing. So this is the balancing of the scores for the 3 different sections: the competencies, personal goals, and company goals. So and you'll see my situation here. I have 48% towards competencies and 52% towards personal goals, with 0 towards company goals. That's, whatever you want. It does need to add up to 100%. So you'll see 52 and 48 does add up to 100. You'll see down here the total is 100. So if I typed in something here, I'd put in 100% here. It's not good enough. It's obviously not right. It won't let me save this because it's not balanced here. So I might change this. Now this is a little different. You do need to type it in like that. So you don't type in like 33 because otherwise that's 3,300%. So if you were going to change it, 0.33 and 0.34, and then it adds up to 100%. So you see how that works there. Right, whatever the balance you want that to be, it could obviously be like 100% towards one thing and 0 towards the others. That's completely up to however you want to configure that. What this will do, though, is it will look at the scores of these various things, and it will use this balancing to give you the overall rating on those things. So if competencies are way more important than personal goals, but you still want to include them, you might do something like 0.75 and 0.25 or something like that. So much more important in there. Right. This is the scale that would be used for the goals. Might match the same as the review scale, might be different. That's up to you on how you do that there. And then finally, at the bottom are the different competencies that you're going to add to this review. Now, these do go by the competency groups. So you may remember in the code tables, I set up those different competency groups. And then within the groups, you could have any number. So you could have literally one competency for every group, which would be fine. Or you might have multiple, like I've got 6 here and I've got 2 there, but it was going to go ahead and average these out per group. So they might do really, really well in revenue, not so well in everything else. And that might, not give them, what you think it is, but it's going to give you the average within the group. And then it's going to use the weighting of the groups to determine the overall competency score. So in my situation, I have 3 groups: the company goals, individual goals, and competencies. Now, these names, again, those are the names that are here. So it does not necessarily match up with these. That's probably a bad example to have the exact same names here. This could be called anything I like. This could be called like financial goals or something like that. All right, whatever you might want to do there. So you could do those however you like. In fact, let me go to one that doesn't have that, so it's not nearly as confusing. Here you go. Humility, stressful situations, managerial aptitude, and attention to detail. So as you can see, those are just the group names. And then within the overall competencies, you do have weighting. So you'll see in this situation, again, it has to add up to 100%, but now you could put it in. So humility and stressful situations are more important in the overall score than managerial aptitude and attention to detail. It, like I mentioned, it does need to add up to 100. So I couldn't put down, let's say, 10% here because it doesn't equal 100. You'll notice even the save button goes away. Can't click it because it's up to 93%. I need to bump this up to, 24, 22. I guess I was right at first, 24%. All right, to get it up there. So, humility and stressful situations are very important. Managerial aptitude, important. Attention to detail, not so much. All right, so you kind of see how that all works there. This is a little different than the percentage there, is because here you put in the full number. So it's not 0.33, you'd actually type in 33. All right, so you'll see how that works there. To add new ones, just click the add and add them into the review here. If I do that, I do need to go into the weighting. And well, I don't have to do a weighting on here because you'll see it still adds up to 100%. But because I added this, it's probably, part of this. Maybe I want to take 5% from here and make this 5%, whatever it is. All right, so you will want to make sure the weighting is set up, because when you first add them, everything is weighted at 0. You'll need to come in and set that up. But even if you add one later, maybe you've started creating it, saved it, came back in, it's going to add it at 0%, and maybe that's not what you want. So you want to make sure you come into this weighting to make sure everything is right. All right, so I've got that in there. If I want to remove one, of course, trash can it. I can remove those there. All right, so once I have those configured there, I'm ready to use this. One other thing in here, you'll notice this button to clone this. Let's say you like this review and it's very close to what you might use for another department, but maybe they have a little bit different competencies. You could copy this, clone it, and then add those competencies for the other department, maybe removing something and adding something else in. So if you have kind of like a standard template, you might use that as your basis and then clone it for the different departments that are going to be using that. In fact, you'll see here, if I check this box on the left, a clone button will show up right here, right? That I can make copies of this for other departments or whatever I might want to do. You'll see here clone, and it's going to say, oh, you're going to clone one. Of course, if I had checked two of them, it's going to say, oh, you're going to clone these two. When I do that clone, you'll see all it does is it will make a new copy of it and have underscore clone after it. So this is an exact copy of the one I just did, and I might want to rename that right there. All right, if I haven't used a template at all for anything, I can delete it. If I've used it even one time, I can't delete it because it's obviously in use. So we do block that. Same thing with, let's say, the competencies or the company goals. If I add something in there and I use it, it will not let me delete them because it's in use. You can make them inactive. So I might come in here and say, this revenue one, no longer important, and I want to make that inactive. I could do that. Same thing with like a company goal. All right, so once I have the templates configured, now I'm ready to set up a review period, which will use the template that I've just configured. So I'll go ahead and add a new one here. Now, before I do this, you'll see workflow is a required field. We've covered workflows in previous trainings, but let me show you just where that is. And there's an important thing about the workflows for performance reviews, and that is the group that it applies to. All right, so if I go down, I'm going to see I actually have 4 of them down here because I have different groups that might be used with these. So as an example here, I've got 30-day review, and this is using the group that I've configured called new hires less than 120 days. In fact, I might even make it more narrow because I'm doing a 30-day review. I might want to say like less than 60. I could set up a group for that. But what it's going to do is when I assign the review to somebody, it's going to look for that somebody in this group. I will not be able to assign a review to somebody if they're not a member of the group from the workflow. All right, so it's very important to remember. It's a little different than, let's say, when you're assigning a workflow to a timesheet. You don't have to necessarily worry about, are they a member of a particular group to be able to use this timesheet. Those could be 2 different things. It might be a group for the timesheet and a completely different group for the approval of a timesheet. But for performance reviews, you have to be a member of the group that's here in the workflow. All right, so that being said, let's go back to the review period here. And of course, here are the workflows I have to do here. So let's just call this a 30-day review. I know there's one out there. All right, 30-day review. Okay. And then I would choose the template. Well, I happen to have one called 30-day review. So I'll go ahead and choose that. All right, what type is this? So you'll see here I have self and manager. I also can add in a couple others in there. I could do 360, which will add peer and direct reports. You'll see this checkbox right here. And now I can add those others in here. Now for a 30-day review, it may not be something that their direct reports or peers are going to be participating in. So that might not be applicable here, but you might do that annually. Maybe you have your peers doing the reviews in there. So that's how you get that turned on, how you get those values is check that box. All right, but in this one, I'm just going to do a self review and a manager review for this. Now, when we're talking about manager, how do we define manager? That's right here. So in my situation, I just have one org structure in my system. What that means is if I go to an employee, let's say Frederick here, I just have manager right here. Now in your setup, you may have others configured here for other things. Where is that done? If you're not familiar with that, that's in the code tables. So let me go to show you where that is, just so you could see where that is in case you don't remember. There's obviously a lot of things that were probably set up. So that's going to be over here in my org structures right here. So user code table, org structure. You'll see I just have one called manager. If I was going to do, let's say, manager and team leader, I'd have to add that here first before it was available on review periods. But that's how we define what does manager mean right here. It means that org structure called manager. All right, so if I had one here called team leader, even though this says the word manager here, I could tell it to use team leader right here, and it would look at that team leader field. All right, I'll go ahead and choose that workflow called 30-day review. All right, now here with the anonymous type and the anonymous level, now when I'm doing a self and a manager review, or even just a self review, the anonymous probably isn't really going to mean anything, because if I'm doing my own review, I'm not anonymous to myself. And if I know who my manager is, they're not anonymous to me. So having that, not really probably that useful for a manager or a self review. But if you're doing a 360 review, that's where it could be very important. You might not want somebody to know who the peer is that is reviewing them, just because what if they want to say something about somebody, but they're worried about, oh no, if they found out I'm the one who said that they're, always cooking fish in the microwave or something, they might come back and, get mad at me and leave a fish on my desk. I don't know. So if I make it anonymous, then I might feel more free to say what I want. Also, the person might go, wait a minute, who's this person who's always saying negative things about me? Well, it's anonymous. I can't really figure it out. So that's where it might really be important. Same thing with direct reports. Maybe an employee would feel more free if it was anonymous to say something about their boss, whatever it might be about their boss. Maybe they wear a really strong cologne or something. I don't know. So if you do the 360, that's where that comes into play right there. Of course, you could do it for the others, but I'm not sure how useful it would be. They probably know who their boss is. All right. Now, the other options here before I go to the frequency. So 360, we already talked about aggregate reviews. So that would aggregate them together. So if I do a self and a manager, it puts them together on the review. So that you can kind of get the overall score on here. You can get like an average of the two if you want to do that way. So, maybe you use that for pay raises or whatever. If they get above a 75% or something, they get a bump up in pay. So you may want to do that aggregating the reviews. All right, here is the frequency for when these reviews happen. So you have a couple of options here. For this, one is custom, which means you're going to put a date. So it might be you're going to say it is on May 1st. All right, you'll see here as an option in a little gray, I would do quote 5/1/2023. All right, that means it's going to start on May 1st, and then it's going to, it covers May 1st plus, whatever I could say the period end date. So maybe I want to say it's all of April, 4/1/2023 to 4/30/2023. All right, so that covers all of April, and then the date the review is going to happen is going to be on 5/1. So I'm hard coding the dates in there. That's the date range it's going to cover in a custom one. I could also do something like the hire date. So I might say at employee.hire date. And then if I was doing a 30-day, I might say plus 30. And then the review period or the review date starts on, the 30th day or maybe the 31st day. And then they have a couple of weeks to do it. So plus 45. All right, so this will look at the hire date to determine that. If I do a recurring, I might say this happens every quarter or every year. So I would, again, have a start date, which might be the hire date if it's anniversary based, but it also could be, let's say, January 1st, and then it's going to be all of the year or something like that. So that's what the difference is between the two. I'm going to do this here just because I want to get this done here, and I'll go ahead and save. All right, so what does that look like now when I'm looking at this? I do need to go in here now, assign it to people, to the employees who are eligible for this particular review. So once I've done that, I can come back in here, and if I hit next, I don't know if I have anybody in the group. Let me just see. Okay, so I have 5 people that have been hired within the last 120 days, or they're in that group. I'm not sure exactly what the configuration of the group is, but you'll see here this person within the last 120 days. There might be a group out there, but that's why I only see 5, because they're the only people in that group back on the workflow. Here, I have some options on how do I want to add them. I can add individually. So I can say, yep, I want to do it for Jerry, and it adds them into here. All right, and then I want to add it to somebody else. I can add them in there. I can also say, well, let's go ahead and add everybody. So all 5 people, well, 4 people would be in there. Or maybe it's a large group that I did, and I want to now do like a subgroup of that. So let's say it was all employees, but I just want to do it for people who are a member of the group called accounting or car audio or whatever. So it would look in the combination of both the group from the workflow and this group to find anybody who matches. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and add all. So they're all here. You can see the review periods that it established. And I'll go ahead and hit next here. This is if I would like to add personal goals. So I could come out here and say, all right, for Vince Quick, I'm going to go out here and say his personal goal is to, I don't know, increase sales. I always pick something like that. All right. And I'll put that as a description. So the review period is the one I'm in, the 30-day review. The due date for this, let's just say, is 3/31/23. All right. And there's the workflow I'm going to use. So you could set those up right here individually like this. Right. I could also import them, or the employee or manager could add a goal through self-service, or the administrator can go to the employee's goals and add it. So there's lots of different ways to do it, but this is doing it right as I'm doing the performance review. And then finally, if I want to add a company goal to this, I could do that and say, let's add that. So everybody's going to be part of this 100%. All right. So now those 5 people have a performance review added to them. I don't have one of their logins right now, but let me show you what it looks like in self-service. So I'm going to jump over there in the last couple of minutes. So I'm now back in self-service. Now this one's already been completed, but this is basically what it's going to look like in self-service. So I'm actually approving this one for Chris. So this is an example. This is his 2021 mid-year review with company goals. And here are the different personal goals that he has. All right. So yeah, and here you can see there, I get the description of this. There's the different goals with the different descriptions of those scores. I'm sorry. If he had a note, it would be over here, but I can see what he scored himself: meets expectations, exceeds. And as I go down, you'll see the various competencies that are here. And I don't know why this says company goals and it doesn't have one, but whatever. But you can see here, there's my overall score for each group. So even though this one had 2, it gave me the average of the 2 to get 70%. This is, I think, a 1 to 5 scale. So he got a 30 and a 4. So the average would be 70. All right, 80% in this one because it just had 1 and so forth. So you can see how it gave that. And then it gave me an average overall score based on the weighting of 70% between these 3. The personal goal, 68%. And then the overall score, 52. Now, the reason it's 52 is because there is no company goal on here, but there's some weighting to the company goal. So he's basically hitting a 0 on the company goal. So it dragged down the overall score. All right. So that's what a performance review looks like in self-service. It's just a drop down menu, just like these, and I could type in notes there. All right. So that is the performance reviews and how that all gets set up in there. I did want to mention one thing real quick. If you would like to do feedback on the employees, that is something that you can enable. I don't have enabled right here, but if you go to your ESS widgets, you can turn on what we call our feedback widget. And let me see if I have this configured here because, yes. All right, so this allows you, it's not a full performance review, but it allows you to give feedback on people. So you'd have to set the questions here, but you can give quick feedback on somebody. So you set up these questions over here. They are, I know it's called feedback, but where is it here? I don't remember. Feedback. I don't recall where that is in here. Let me just look real quick. I don't want to go over too long. And if Connor or Patrick remember what it's called in here, I would love that. I don't see it in here. I've set this up, but it was like a year ago. So I apologize. We will put in and we'll send something out about where the feedback are. I'm not sure if anybody sees it here and I'm just missing it. But you could set up your different feedback reasons in there. And then the employees can do feedback within self-service there. So they can send a real quick, like positive or negative things about somebody. So maybe Ted had an experience with Charlene here and wanted to say something positive or negative about that. He could say it's well done or needs to be improved, and then send that off. So again, this is not a performance review, obviously, because it's just 1 or 2 questions. You could add more than 1 if you like, but it's not an actual performance review. You're not scoring them on something, but it allows you to give that like positive or negative feedback very quickly. All right. And then the other thing is journals. That's part of performance reviews. I didn't get a lot of time to spend on this one, but let me just talk about journals real quick. Journals are, think of them as notes on your employees. So something a manager may want to add to an employee. So let's say I want to say something about Carl. I can see in your feedback I've provided to them. Let me just do a journal entry for somebody. I can add something in here. You can define these. I could say what this is. Great job with the team meeting, right? I can copy and paste or just type in my feedback in here, my notes about this. I could add an attachment and just say, Carl did a great job on that meeting today. It's going to record the date and time of this, so I can go back and look at these. And you can also allow Carl to see these things. If it's not private, he's going to be able to see that in self-service, but allows me to add that into his reviews. So that way, when I'm doing my reviews, I might want to go back and look at the journal entries out there for my team and say, oh, I'm doing Carl's review. What kind of journal entries did I have this year? I can see all those notes that I might have had on him. So that's something you have out there as an option. So I apologize for going a minute over, but let me just switch back over here to our slideshow. I see there is one question about Q&A. It's in the HR settings table. Thank you, Nancy, for that. So let me just talk about that real quick. The feedback is in the HR settings. Yes, it's under employee engagement. Let me just switch that. That's right. Like I said, I set this up like a year ago. You'll see right here is feedback. All right, so you can set up those different things. So feedback. Right, so just like that. You can have as many as you like in here, and then when I do the feedback, it would be an option in here. I might need to refresh for it to show, but it would be an option in here. Thank you, Nancy, for that. I appreciate that. All right, so now back to that slideshow real quick, and let me just talk about what's coming up here. So in 2 weeks, we are going to be covering recruiting and open positions. So that was something in here was review templates. That's where they go, is into the recruiting. So that's on May 9th there. Then we're going to talk about employee engagement. So things that you might do in self-service, like the engagement feed, events, and links and so forth as part of the employee engagement. Then we're going to jump over to payroll for a couple of sessions, one on incomes, so the configuration of incomes and how all that works. And then we'll talk about certified rates. So that's our next 4 events coming up here. We do them every 2 weeks. Thank you for joining us today. I hope all of our questions, if there were any, were answered. And if you do have anything else, questions about this, please feel free to reach out to us. You'll see our email address, our phone number down there, or within the system, you can go into your administration, hit the question mark, and ask questions through there. You can send in support tickets, and of course, see the phone number and email address to reach out to us. So thanks again for joining us today. Really appreciate that. Hope you have a great day, and I'll look forward to seeing you in about 2 weeks.